Yeah, I don't know, man. You ever just feel like life is just catapulting towards some greater purpose?
Average fat cats with bloated ego. We are the only DJ crazy enough to tattoo Jackie Brown on his ass.
This is Michael Mann, and I ride with
Extended clip.
I can go right up on here. You guys can hear me.
That NPR cadence.
Yeah.
NPR flow.
Dude, the NPR flow is way too sensual, though. Like, I don't get why you need to be up on the mic so hard.
That is like ASMR, like proxy, like some weird. There's some weird other pleasures people are getting from NPR just in the news, like
just like I was
stuff.
gonna say. Exactly. Like, there's people getting other pleasures from all those ASMR videos on YouTube, and I'm sure before that it was just like NPR and like books on tape, you know?
yeah.
Just a book on tape that's like sensual in parentheses, you know? I mean, that like a sensual reading of
Moby Dick.
Moby Dick, the Karma Sutra.
Yeah, I mean, with that kind of book, you have to have it. You're not going to get like the Kama Sutra narrated by Wilford Brimley.
Like jacking off to the Kama Sutra, like a book that's like supposed to be for like sex moves you do with like another person.
The Kama Sutra book on tape is that's like a 90s like Homer Simpson joke. We're back on Extended Clip. It's part 2 of our Best of 2023 episode, and we're just going to get right back the fuck into it. I'm still your host, Eddie Averill.
I'm still Malcolm Baum, still, I think.
I'm no longer JT White.
Oh, no. Oh, God. Why is the Domino's app blowing up my phone? I don't like that at all. I've ordered one pizza. In the last year, but they know how broke I am. I think my Citibank app and my Domino's app are talking, you know?
Throw in a couple coupons, sweeten the deal. I think that'll hook them.
Number 8 of 2023, coming in at also 16 points, A Fire by Christian Petzold. Now, Christian Petzold's been on quite a good run lately. I feel like all of his movies show up on year-end lists, but they haven't quite made it to ours. I don't think like the timelines match up. Like, were we doing a podcast when Transit came out?
Or maybe.
Oh, maybe Transit actually did make our list then, because I liked Transit, and you liked Transit, and Phoenix was before we did a podcast, though.
Yeah. No, I have to, like, for Petzold, it's kind of the opposite of Hung, where I feel I've been meaning to watch his movies every year, and I just haven't for no good reason other than laziness. But I was glad I checked out A Fire here because it's really good.
JT, did you get a chance to check this one out?
No, I haven't. I haven't seen Eddie Petzold still. That's a big blind spot I need to fix. But yeah, no, I haven't seen A Fire.
Yeah, no, Transit is quite good, but the thing is, like, so his last few, he had this diptych of Transit and Phoenix, which were these, like, very interior...
Did what with his dick?
He dipped it into the transit system. It was flagrant. He got arrested, and he was never able to take a train in Germany again.
So that's what that movie's about. Interesting.
Yeah, it's about a train that transports you to 1945, but the guy gets caught in it, you know? So only part of him goes there. No, but so Transit and Phoenix both played with, like, German World War II history, which is not a very playful subject. But obviously, like, they're playful in a matter of speaking in that the period details are a mix of contemporary life and like period signifiers, kind of, and like they're plots that have to do with the past but are very much rooted in the present as a kind of aesthetic dichotomy. So then when he goes off and makes A Fire, I was kind of blindsided by it when I heard that it was a kind of Romare-esque movie about a writer taking a retreat in the woods. And it's kind of like a, sorry, let me miss my thing. It's kind of like for guys who love Eric Romare films, but always find themselves getting really frustrated with the characters in them. That's like the lead character in this is like Leon, played by Thomas Schubert. You know, he's the guy who's watching a Romare movie getting pissed off, you know, because it's a classic How You Gonna Be Mad on Vacation movie. It's a guy shielding nature from himself with his laptop as he's trying to write, and just like denying himself, for the first half at least, denying himself the pleasures of an art house romance with this mysterious woman before he finally gives into it. And it's really phenomenal. I love the passivity of Leon, and he just lets these dramas play out in front of him as a dramatist himself, until he finally gives in, because Paula Beer, as the elusive, mysterious woman who was staying at the cabin before they arrived there, is like a perfect novelist's muse without being too one-sided, and the film allows her own independence as well. And it's all these things put together. It's like this comedy of manners, an art house romance, a vacation movie. It becomes a sneaky climate movie about impeding natural disasters, destroying our last glimpses of natural beauty, and it's just like another notch in the bedpost for old Chris Petz.
I love that phrase, another notch in the bedpost. Another body he slayed in this movie.
Yeah.
No,
The notches in the bedpost. I gotta get. You know what? I hate to say it. This is the most Reddit thing I'll ever say. Giving it up for Dan Harmon. There was a season 2 Community joke about that where they're like making notches under the table about, you know, something about probably how many pussies Joel McHale has slayed. But you know, I think it's Abed's character has one that just says notches, and he just like puts another one in there, like just counting the notches. It's a very good meta joke about notches in the bedpost.
ladies, if you go over to a guy's house and he's got notches in his bedpost, run, don't walk.
You know that man's watching Community.
That's my new favorite bit on the podcast, the relationship advice extended clip. But
For women too, like not guy advice. Guys are not allowed to take our advice. We were only giving advice to the women who listen to the show.
Exactly, yeah.
If your man's watching Community, lady, that's the deal breaker.
Yeah.
See, I don't get the racial flair that's coming out in your voice just because I'm giving advice
what do
to
you
a
mean?
woman.
What do you mean?
What racial flair? I'm just talking more expressively. Like, you can't do this, you got to do that. You know?
Yeah.
You know what? I accept.
No, for a fire, I feel like when I first started watching the movie, the passivity you're talking about, it kind of took me a minute to kind of get on the movie's wavelength, and then when I did, I really kind of I latched on. And yeah, I think it is funny how you said, like, it is like a guy watching a Romare movie, you know what I mean? And it is, unfortunately, a fire might win one of my another superlatives, the guy I'm most unfortunately like award.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I saw some writers being like, you know, I hated this character so much. It's like, bro, that's you know, the silver screen is really a giant mirror sometimes, you know.
Yeah. So just kind of like the way this movie kind of sneaks up over time, and then like kind of like the fire aspect and how that kind of shifts everything. I don't know, really gave it a lot of dramatic verve, and I feel like I can't develop too much thoughts on this movie that you didn't say, but so yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. But Petzold, that's like a director I need to keep checking in with every year. Like, he's earned that right, where I'm like, all right, I got to check out this new Petzold. Like, it's definitely
honestly
gonna be worthwhile.
We might have to go back and see if some of the recent ones were like the new classics. Like, we might gotta.
Totally.
I keep saying we might gotta. What is that? We might have to. we might have to go back to. Well, it's because I'm saying we might have to go back to Phoenix in Transit and just talk about them in the context of like the best of 2010s or the best of the 21st century. I've seen some really convincing writing on that, and you know, I liked those movies quite a bit, but I don't think I fully got them. So I really want to go back to those, especially with how much I really, really liked A Fire. I mean, A Fire was my number 4 or something like that of the year. It was very high on my list. Let me confirm that. Yeah, it was number 4 on my personal list. So let's move on to number 7. This is one that I did not get to see. This was Fallen Leaves by Aki Kaurismäki, which is ironic because, first of all, we've already talked about this movie a bit, but neither of you had seen a Kaurismäki before. It was your first, and I have seen, I think, 4 of his movies and did not see this one just because I didn't have time and didn't want to just squeeze it into year-end catch-up, kind of, and I wanted to give it the proper attention when I get to it eventually, but you guys both liked it quite a bit, huh?
Yeah. As Malcolm had said earlier, I think I've avoided first film syndrome, but I in terms of that, there are things that I don't know. I think I'm gonna like this Kaurismäki guy, especially with how akin to an Ozu movie this was. In particular, I don't know, the shots of the signs, the way transit and sort of just modern industrial life is depicted, along with the fact that the movie is a journey of 2 characters who are not particularly expressive, and just you deal with a lot of interiority within them, and then very minor moments become sort of very big things. And yeah, I don't know, the central just sort of aspect of believably miserable world setting where these 2 characters are kind of able to escape in a way through a little bit of movies and a little bit of romance. But obviously that's a large oversimplification. But yeah, also just, I mean, Malcolm, you wanted to, you mentioned you're going to talk about the cinematography for this. Just a beautiful looking movie.
Of the scenes of at the bar, whether it's the lead male by himself or whether they're, he's with his boy at karaoke, and kind of just the production design and the look of the movie, and I don't know if you saying Ozu is a good point, because I think that's also what made this movie stand out and kind of made it more enjoyable. It's this is obviously influenced by an older style of movies. Very this is positivity has gotten a bad name over the years, but it's a very life affirming movie, while also addressing the stark and miserable realities of that the lead characters go through here, and I think it does a great job of kind of establishing these individual characters, in their lives, and we know kind of their problems, whether it's both of them money, for the male lead character alcoholism and whatnot. And I think there's just a lot of smart narrative schemes that I don't know, that just enhance the movie. I love this is classic rom-com fare almost, but when he loses the female lead's phone number, and he just kind of has to keep going back to the same spot over and over again in hoping that she'll be there. And I don't know, it does it all in a way that it's underratedly stylistic, but it's done without fanfare, and finding that balance I think is one of the key balances of making artistic movies, is having the style inform the narrative, vice versa, and both of them compounding to make it stronger. And it's also a very funny movie too.
Yeah,
I love the best friend character of the male lead. Both of the leads best friends are very funny in this movie. You know what I mean? You almost want to see a movie of that, of them hooking up or some shit like that. And just kind of the dry humor and the conversational humor, it all feels very realistic and lived in. And the conclusions are very sweet, and I really like this movie. I put it at number 2 on my personal list, and I'm definitely going to be checking out more of this guy's movies, Aki Kaurismäki.
Yeah, no, there's one in terms of. I'm glad you brought up how funny it was. I love that they go to see The Dead Don't Die for their first date. Is such a funny choice, and just like that, you have like the two old dudes that are leaving the theater, and like the first thing that they say is the one is like, "Oh, I think this kind of was like Bresson's Diary of a Country Priest," and then the other one's like, "No, I thought it was like a Band of Outsiders," or it's just a very, very funny moment. I think Kaurismäki is like good buddies with Jarmusch, so it's a fun little nod there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they definitely influenced each other's style, working from the 80s onward, and they both are influenced by Ozu and kind of fuse that with their love of more outsider characters and kind of alternative cultural spheres. Kaurismäki, I guess, well, I would say both of them being so political in that sense. It's like these outsider characters are always going to be forced into those situations because of some societal ills. Even if they're total weirdos in some of the Jarmusch movies, you know, probably same with some of the Kaurismäki ones that I haven't seen. But yeah, no, that one looked very good. Can't wait to see that one. Do you guys want to give out the award for best supporting performance?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let me go first because my choice was actually Jean Hittaitan, who's I absolutely slaughtered that name. I without a doubt, like that was like a D+ performance on the name there. It's these Finnish names are tough for me, man. I'm just gonna be honest, but Huatari in Fallen Leaves, I don't know. I think he adds such a levity to the movie, and I just love the performance. And I got a couple other shout outs. Charles Melton in May December, obviously it being my favorite movie of the year. I have to, give him nods. Jessica Lange in Marlowe, Real Heads Know. Come
on, man.
Just an honorable mention.
And you're allowed to. You're allowed to. That's why it's there.
Simon Rex in The Sweet East, and by far that's my favorite. I like the movie overall, but the segment with Simon Rex kind of being like a new wave conservative, race realist type guy, and his like weird teenage romance, like something he got out of a 17th century book. It's just so hilarious, and Rex plays it to a perfect T.
JT, your supporting actor or actress.
Actor. I mean, I can do I won't do one of both. I'll just do a lump, just no gender, just acting in a supporting role. I'm gonna say Kevin McGee in Boston Johnny as the man of the woods. Like that, I feel like I don't know. It depends on the Motown Works. McGee's roles range from like more starring to supporting. He is generally in the more supporting tier, but the man of the woods is just such a funny, ridiculous turn, especially from a man who is usually like a more stoic villain. And I think he brings a lot of that to this role, which is just like so, like the way he's dressed is so goofy that I think, like, I don't know, it brings out I forget who I was talking to about like Motown movies recently, but it is like the beauty of them all being like variation, like really inventive variations on like more or less the same thing. I feel like you come across like new layers of performances from these like small like hometown actors. And I mean, obviously McGee is one of the breakout stars of the Roxburgh Farley movies. But yeah, no, his role as Man of the Woods was fantastic.
The Man of the Woods might also be my best supporting actor. The Man of the Woods is, that's like, I mean, you could call it pastiche to things like Twin Peaks and others that have had mystical woodsmen using their native ancestry, or maybe just their connection to the woods. I think in this one it's just connection to the woods. That's just how he talks, you know. The man of the woods is fucking fantastic in that. I gotta say that's one of the funniest things there is. I also will shout out the editor character from Close Your Eyes, the character of
That's a good one,
so you have Mario Pardo in Close Your Eyes, the character of Max, the editor. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And you know what? Something from some early year slop. Not a very good movie. In fact, some of this was laughable. But all the performances and just the weight and watchability of the movie held it together. I'm talking about Jonathan Majors in Creed 3. That is a quest. I know. Look.
What a shout
I would
out.
say also Jonathan Majors on Good Morning America up there as well.
I forgot about Creed 3.
Also,
Creed 3 wasn't bad.
Yeah, Stephen A. Smith in Creed 3. Also very good. For Sports Movie Quarter, Stephen A. Smith in Creed 3, Scott Van Pelt in Champions. You know, those are the performances that you used to see in every movie that had to do with sports, even a little bit, you know. But I just wanted to shout those out. But yeah, Jonathan Majors in Creed 3, like, yeah, he's not, you know, Dolph Lundgren or Mr. T, but he's like up there. It's like one of the better villain performances in that series. I liked him a lot. That was the best part of the movie for sure, was his performance.
Creed 3, a movie I forgot about. I saw Zoller put it on his end of year list. It's like, you know what? That's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that Zoller put How to Blow Up a Pipeline on his list. It's like a nice olive branch across the aisle, you know?
To me, that means he beat the accusations. You know what I mean? And also, put Jawan on there. A lot of you guys aren't seeing one Indian movie a year. You know what I mean? Not to pat myself on the back for seeing one. But it's,
guys, I'm just as progressive as S. Craig Zoller.
Yeah. But literally the most leftist list of the year is Craig's. Like, literally, look, any end of year list, Craig Zoller's list is literally the most leftism coded one of the year. I'm sorry to say.
You want to keep with performances? Let's go lead performance. Let's just knock them right out of the park. Because my lead performance is going to be the lead of the number 6 movie of the year, according to our list. So I'll kick it back to you guys. Malcolm, do you have your lead performance of the year that you want to shout out?
Oh, yeah. I kind of went with an obvious pick. I really loved Giamatti in The Holdovers. I just really did. And I think a lot of the movie hinges on his acting, too, which I think is, you know, maybe, you know, as a teacher, that's how I grade my papers sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, if there's some weight put upon your shoulders, I kind of respect that. And, yeah, I think we'll talk about The Holdovers, but Giamatti... This is something I kind of had trouble picking my favorite performance of the year. So I kind of just went with something that obviously stuck out in my mind. But there was a lot of good performances this year.
JT.
Yeah, I mean, I would also probably echo Giamatti to some extent. But I mean, beyond that, to shout out a movie that was on my list that I haven't mentioned at all yet. Another amazing Indian movie from this year was Leo. It's a part of the Lokesh cinematic universe by the same director who brought you last year's Vikram. Leo was kind of a spin on History of Violence, where it's about a man played by Vijay, the Indian star, who is like a family man now, but was once Leo Das, a like notorious like gangster. And I think it's fun how his performance, he's able to like, I don't know. It's that type of like awakening thing that occurs in a history of violence, where you sort of see, kind of, not like an unraveling of like a character, but you sort of see this other side emerging when the second life that they've tried to build for themselves sort of falls apart by the outside violent forces like coming back into their life. And I don't know, it was one of the I think it's a lead performance that obviously ties together the whole film. Yeah, I don't know.
All right. Getting into my lead performances, I will shout out a couple runners-up real quick from the two German films that I loved. I thought that they were both not carried by, but were great in large part because of their lead performances. So Anne Radpole as Inga in My Falcon, and Thomas Schubert as Leon in A Fire were both fantastic and really contributed to the interiority of the drama of those movies. I also wanted to shout out Hong Sang-soo regular Ki Ju-bong as the kind of Hong stand-in poet in Our Day. His final moments, not just the interview scene, which kind of picks up where the Q&A scene from Like You Know It All leaves off, and it almost like he feels like he repeats some lines from that 15 years later. Not that he was in that movie, but another Hong movie. And I just feel like his final moments out on the rooftop by himself, just silent, you achieve such an interiority with him. And I really think that's something that is really great. But the best lead performance of the year to me was Joaquin Phoenix in Beau is Afraid, which is also the number 6 film of the year. That's right. Ari Aster's Beau is Afraid is our number 6. And I guess we'll start by talking about Joaquin because I wanted to give him this award. This is one of the most reaction-based, like reaction shot-based Joaquin performances. Inherent Vice is probably the only one I would put above it. Thinking about when Bigfoot starts eating the weed, like that reaction shot's the best thing in his whole career probably. But this movie is just a lot of him reacting to crazy shit going on, and I think it's really fantastic at that. But I like that's what gets at the point of the film is as comedy, but not as a Joaquin as a comedic leading man, but as Joaquin as your guide into a comedic world. He's almost playing the nervous straight man, if you will. And that's what I love so much about this. I mean, it is influenced by people like Woody Allen, Albert Brooks, and Philip Roth. And it's like, yeah, Woody Allen has his movies where he's running around telling jokes on camera. But a lot of times these guys are almost trying to play the straight man in these comedies, but they're so neurotic and everything that they can't help but be the comedic character. And that's why he's so good in this movie. So Beau is Afraid, by Ari Aster. The first hour may have been the hardest I've ever turned on a filmmaker in real time. I disliked Hereditary so much that I even skipped Midsummer, and some years went by and I just don't really care that much about the whole like elevated horror thing. I think like 4 years ago that was a thing though, right? It was like,
it's over.
I like horror movies.
Anymore.
Exactly, right? But it was like, I like horror movies. I'm not going to give into this bullshit It Comes at Night, kind of shit.
Wow.
Like,
I come whenever I want.
Ayo.
That might have been the lowest point of elevated horror is It Comes at Night. As people hate on Hereditary, it's like which I don't like Hereditary either, but you watch It Comes at Night, you're like, okay, there's levels to this shit at least.
That one was by the Trey Edward Schultz brothers, right?
True, and I think The Weeknd, he found his new auteur to terrorize because I think they're going to make something together, so The Idol Part 2 may be on the way. So, maybe I might turn on him next year, who knows?
From the star of The Idol and the guy who brought you Krisha.
Waves.
Oh man, Waves. That's the real one. But anyway, Ari Aster's Beau is Afraid. As I said, like I don't feel riled up by that. So I went in with like an open mind because I heard this was good. even by people who didn't like those movies. I was like, all right, I'll see what it is. And right away, it's not a horror movie, and that's why it's good. I think maybe I just don't get him as a horror guy, really. The city and the suburbs in this movie, in the first hour especially, are just presented as everything in contemporary life that a person who is maybe a little bit nervous can be afraid of, even without the personal context of Ari Aster or Joaquin Phoenix or whoever the viewer may be. It's a satire on the way that the wealthy fear the urban landscapes that they often tower over, and it's grounded in the real feelings that any person would have just walking through a city that has people dying or overdosing on the street and, trying to get into your apartment building and stuff. But it turns out the suburbs aren't that much better. Because like maybe Nathan Lane wants to make you his new adult son, but everyone is zonked out from prescription drug addiction and abuse, and there's like the ghosts of the war on terror looming because there's all these young men who voluntarily died in a war everyone agrees was wrong, and so the nuclear family of America, even in the comfortable suburbs, is just completely crumbling. And all of this is clearly played both through Astor's satirical attitude and through Beau's anxiety as the main character. So that takes up the first like hour and a half of the movie. And for me, that hour and a half of the movie is easily the best of the year. I think the rest of the movie is good. But that first half is just like, I truly think that's like a masterpiece of a first half of a movie,
Absolutely.
And I don't even think the second half's a disappointment. It's still very good. The film is still like number 5 on my list or something like that, or maybe even higher. Everything else is really compelling. I just missed the disgusting apartment in the city and the pristine house in the suburbs. And I don't know, it's just, I think that the inward investigation of the second half is something that he needed to do. It's like, that's just the way a film like this has to be shaped, right? So after the suburbs, we go through the woods and also into his own mind. And that's an easy metaphor to make, of course, as he escapes civilization and gets further interiority and stumbles upon some weird theater camp thing where clearly it's like kind of making fun of it, but kind of indulging these weird theater camp kitschy sensibilities, which is probably the weaker part of the movie. But once he comes out of that and confronts the mother character and has that fucking trial showdown at the end, like Albert Brooks is defending your life, it's just insane. And I really feel like it does build in a really productive way, even in that middle segment, which feels aimless at the time. I don't know. It's like, I don't want to say it's like the film of a free man with all these 3-hour crazy indulgences. It's the man who wants to desperately be free. He's still pulling all these reference points. He's still trying to break out of his own shell as an artist. And I think that's so commendable to watch. It's a messy film and I love it, but I think there's flaws to it. But it's easily the most surprising new release for me in quite some time, because I had this guy pegged for just like not for me, and I loved this movie.
I'm just surprised at like how many people who were already in the bag for him. I mean, I guess it makes sense with this being a little bit of a departure in terms of genre, but just completely like missed the mark on it in terms of like negative criticism that I've read about the movie. Like, I feel like in particular, like the bluntness of it, it is something that people were like didn't respond to, or particularly like just like the exaggeration in like the first half with the nightmarish qualities of the city, like towards the end, like the penis monster and then the like trial. But it's just like, this is a comedy. Like, it should be exaggerated, like character, like over the top. Like, I think all of those qualities are like incredibly commendable about the film, that it's like going this direction with it. And it's just, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I don't know how you could misinterpret that this film is supposed to be like incredibly funny. But like, I feel like people who are going into it more of like just on board with him doing like dour like horror that is like kind of humorless, which not to say like it necessarily is. I think the parts that shine through And what I saw in Hereditary is kind of a nasty streak with his sense of humor. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just surprised that more people didn't really like this one. Again, especially because it's like some of the most ridiculous. To talk about another great weed smoking scene from this year when
Oh my God.
Nathan's Lane's daughter is like bullying like grown ass like Joaquin into smoking weed, and he's high in the back seat of a car being like driven by like 17-year-olds like that,
Who are
like
filming him with their iPhones too.
yeah, who are filming him. It's like that is like an absolute like nightmare scenario, and just so funny. Like Joaquin, again, like his reaction to all of that is hysterical. Like that's so good.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, like the negative, because this is the most controversial movie of the year, as you know, people, or just like there was a lot of negative receptions to it, and there's like people like us who like it, kind of bouncing off of that, and you know, it is. I could kind of see why people don't like, because it's a movie that's trying to make you feel bad in a certain sense, or trying to get you on that level of anxiety, maybe that Bo's feeling, trying to get you in his mind state. But I feel like just the strong kind of like nightmare logic and imagery that's throughout this movie is so strong and so striking. There's like a lot of scenes like that where you talk about him smoking weed in the car, or I think of like something I've been thinking about throughout this year is like the flashbacks to when he was a kid and he was on a cruise and he had like a potential like young romance that was unfulfilled and whatnot. And there's something like just the style of the you know, the cruise and kind of like how it's coming back into the narrative. I don't know. It's just something very striking. And there's a lot of decisions that, you know, kind of skew any kind of like narrative logic sometimes. And yeah, so like I guess I could kind of see like maybe people who are fans of like Hereditary and Midsommar maybe not liking this because it's like there's also like a tone in this, like, I don't know, characters that suffer through anxiety. When we show that on screen, when directors show that on screen, they're usually trying to invoke a sense of sympathy for that character. Whereas like, I don't think that's the number one priority here, you know, with the movie. And I don't know. Yeah, I was just impressed by its audaciousness. And I think you like whether you find it funny or not is probably what hinges on your enjoyment in the movie, because there's a lot of people who are just like, you know, like friends, people who weren't involved in the film community, they're like, what the hell was that? Like, I didn't want to feel that way. You know what I mean? I don't want to be guilty when they put me on trial for my life. You know what I mean? That's not a great conclusion. But I like, obviously, you know, we've championed people like Todd Solondz. We value kind of the powerful negative feelings movies can make us feel sometimes. And so I liked Beau is Afraid. That's something I've been kind of itching to rewatch, because there's certain scenes that just kind of stand out in my mind and kind of stay with me.
Yeah, that cruise, the setup on that, like the art direction and cinematography is so interesting. I don't know. I love how fanciful he gets with this and how really detached from our actual society it feels. Like it's really in the mind of its main character. Like the world exists in Joaquin's mind, kind of, and it's like just slightly different than what we actually live in. And I really love that. I thought the movie was so good. I need to rewatch that for sure, because there's a lot of stuff that I kind of forgot about, like certain scenes, and that I wish I could talk a little deeper about it. But we digress and we move on, because we only got like an hour more of airtime here, and we got to get into our top 5. Number 5, Boston Motherfucking Johnny by Charles Roxburgh, starring Matt Farley for Moturn Media. Now, we've talked about these guys for years now, right? But I feel like there might be some people who listen to this podcast that aren't like extended clip heads and aren't, you know, maybe catching up on all the Moturn Media stuff through either us or, you know, Will or any other podcasts or writers. So, you know, it's like to a certain sect of online cinephiles and residents of New England, there's no need for an introduction to the latest work from Matt Farley and Charles Roxburgh. But I'm going to start from scratch here because Boston Johnny still has a measly 250 Letterboxd logs. Now, this is a movie that people can go out and watch right now. You buy it on Vimeo. It's in your smart TV. It's in your laptop, whatever. And this is a movie that I think everyone should be watching. For Moturn Media, for the uninitiated, Farley has been making music and films for decades now. And if art was purely quantitative, he would be the greatest songwriter of all time. But since art is about quality, he's merely in the top 75 or so. Farley and his director, Charles Roxburgh, have made a baker's dozen of micro-budget films starring local casts spanning the genre gamut with monster suit horror, fantastical family dramas, autobiography, and so on. The pair of films, Metal Detector Maniac and Heard She Got Married a couple years back, marked a stylistic turning point, and comparisons began to flourish between them and other productive and stylistically unique filmmakers like Hong Sang-soo or Joe Swanberg. And they're comedies too. Like, all these guys make funny movies that are very dialogue based, and but these movies, compared to their earlier work, felt a little more serious and composed, setting up major comedic payoffs through narrative rather than just silly jokes. But back to Boston Johnny, now the pair is returning to the incredibly silly, high concept and high joke density comedy of something like River Beast, with a slight sense of maturity earned along the way. Matt Farley's doing a voice in this movie that is the furthest from his typical speaking voice that I can recall him ever doing. It's like a Jim Carrey or Adam Sandler movie from the 90s, and it's charming in its inconsistencies. And Farley's the title character, an outspoken, idiosyncratic, and possibly mentally ill local pitchman. He's also a musician who plays at the local breakfast nook. And don't tip him with your money, because he doesn't want your money. He wants your hash browns. I won't spoil too many of the jokes here. The film is just full of these insane idiosyncrasies, and it kind of reminds me of Hubie Halloween in that way. A lot of Farley stuff does, but there's a dog showdown between its rightful owner and Boston Johnny, who, by the way, just steals a dog for fun. Just horrifying behavior here by Boston Johnny, a totally immoral character. And then the man of the woods gets involved, Kevin McGee, with his mysticism. And look, I don't think it's as strong of a drama as Magic Spot. Like, that one had like a really personally fulfilling emotional core to it. But this is like the funniest movie of the year to me, and that might be worth more right now.
Heard She Got Murdered is also on my list for the year, which I think that is a little bit more goofy to that, especially when compared to the companion film of Heard She Got Married. But like, yeah, no, Boston Johnny is just like such a just pure, just ridiculous movie. And again, I think that there are like little variations in the Farley Roxburgh filmography that like continue to, I don't want to say challenge, but like surprise me every time. Like the dog like competition that you mentioned there, just like hilarious. And in terms of like the little banner presentation it has beforehand, just like so goofy and just outrageous. And no one is like making the kind of comedies that they're doing. To me, it's something that's like in the vein of like a Tim and Eric style comedy, but like with a lot more like sensitivity and earnestness. And I feel like that could potentially like rub some people the wrong way, but it's still just like ridiculous. And then they just like fixate on such weird like concepts or like lines of dialogue that like ring throughout the movie. And I mean, like Boston Johnny's like a catchphrase of all the time, which is delivered in just like the most outrageous like high pitch register that's hard to like I dropped earlier at a time Like just
On time.
on time. And it's just something that like you watch the movie once and then you're just like thinking about like anytime there's all the time. It's out of time. And yeah.
Also, his listing of the different parts of the morning where he does his activities.
Yeah.
That has influenced me greatly in the last 3-4 days. I've just been walking around thinking, all right, listen to a podcast in the early morning. I'll listen to a podcast in the mid-morning. I'll listen to a podcast in the early afternoon. All the time. It's one of the most ridiculous things that's just like so many of these films are filled with what feel like inside jokes, but you don't have to be inside to get them. You only have to be inside the movie to get them. Like it's, the inside of the inside joke is just the 90-minute window in which that movie exists. And then that is always going to be with you to make dumb references to that, whether it's with your friends who also watch those movies or just to yourself like a crazy person. Number 4. Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah. I guess I give this comment a lot, but didn't see it. But I know Moturn's quality. I'm gonna watch those movies very soon. Love what Farley and Roxburgh do.
Number 4, Oppenheimer by Christopher Nolan. Malcolm.
Yes.
Why don't you lead us off on Oppie?
Yeah. No, I think like more. There's a lot of likable aspects to this movie, whether it's like the barrage of supporting characters and kind of like the individual moments that Nolan gives for them to shine. And like, I love the propulsion of the movie, the pacing. This is probably the best pacing of the year, I have to say, with Oppenheimer, because it really kind of just really chugs along in a way where, you realize, you do get some bomb action, but a lot of it are just scientists, having arguments or discussions rather, maybe, you know what I mean? And Nolan kind of, I don't know, finds that. And I love how Nolan frames the character of Oppenheimer himself, kind of like this guy who he knows a lot of things. He's not dumb. Like he's, well, obviously he's not dumb, but like he's not playing ignorant to what he's doing here, building the nuclear bomb, and kind of, kind of the negative ramifications of it, and like kind of his socialist past that he went through, and kind of the pain he had with a relationship he formed there. But like kind of like a guy, like frames him in history as like this guy who kind of knew what he was doing, kind of knew what the negative consequences were anyways, but kind of like decides to do with it anyways because he's part of like history and like something grand. But then obviously as the last third of the movie comes in, it's something that kind of haunts him, and it's not as great as it's not a plaque he has on his fire mantle, or if he does, he might look at it and kind of be like, now I just remember the bad shit. But yeah, it's I'm like, it's I think this was a hit for a reason, you know what I mean? Like with Nolan, and I think, I haven't seen a lot of his movies, but I think it's probably my favorite Nolan, because I don't know, maybe I'm just not into sci-fi as much. Maybe I'm just more into history, like a dad.
Facts.
But yeah, I like this a lot.
Yeah, no, I really liked this, and even if it's not sci-fi, it still fits into that mad scientist. Yeah, it's fiction about science, but it still fits into that like Christopher Nolan as Hollywood's mad scientist thing, which I love. Those are his best movies, whether it's Interstellar, Tenet, or this one, and he's just treating it like an experiment, but in a way, it's like he's using the scientific method or whatever to explore how he could possibly maximize either, let's say for Interstellar, Tenet, and this one, sentimentality, high concept genre innovations, and for this one, history and morality, and it's interesting that he kind of uses each of those kind of like planks, because he's not just like ditching those ideas as he goes. It kind of builds onto it as it goes, because the sentimentality he achieved in Interstellar, that's not going to like leave him forever. That's he's a changed filmmaker after that. There's always going to be a little bit of that in him, and the guy who made Tenet is never going to go away either, and there's always going to be that little bit of a genre scientist there, but I love that this one is so much more. It really feels more about morality than it does about history. And I think that's such an interesting approach to take to a historical drama. It's somewhere between Eric Bana's Vinegar Strokes in Munich and Hiroshima Mon Amour, I guess. I like both of those movies too, and I think that, like Beau is Afraid, maybe you could say it's top heavy, but I'm only going to say it as a compliment, like just in how good the first hour or so is, when he's like studying Picasso at museums and thinking about, as he puts it, being haunted by the troubles of a hidden universe, and it has all those crazy special effects shots that are all abstract and everything, just of weird like atoms or whatever's floating around in there, and Nolan's cutting across all the different formats and the timelines and scenes, and it's like, oh, he's back. It's like Inception level intercutting, and that's the thing. History and morality. How about this? Christopher Nolan's closest companion in his dramatic intercutting, good old D-Dub Griffith. Just saying. He's been doing Intolerance since Inception, you know? Really since The Dark Knight Rises, he's been doing his Intolerance shit, or The Dark Knight, rather. Since The Dark Knight, he's been doing his Intolerance shit with his Griffithian cross-cutting. But yeah, I really love that intro. But then later on, I think it hits a second peak with both the text sequence, but more so the moral reckoning that follows, that announcement of the bombs being dropped at that fucking atomic pep rally, as we called it on the episode, is just like, that's his greatest demonstration of his classical drama skills, is the interiority he reaches with Murphy there, in that through whether it's the selective sound mix and the sound effects of the rousing faces being turned into burnt carcasses, and just the close-ups on Murphy, it's truly stomach churning, and it's really one of the heights of Nolan's filmography in that one little scene. JT, you liked Oppenheimer.
Loved it. It ranks pretty highly. I think it's my 12th of the year, but I still something that I feel like, in terms of like, I don't know, to do an Armand White style better than. Everyone was talking about Barbenheimer this last year, and there is I don't know. There's more. I mean, I think both movies have overt political messages, but while like the sort of like very watered down feminism of like Feminism 101 of Barbie kind of fails, because I feel like it's not packaged with like an all that interesting, funny, or compelling movie. I was just and continue to be surprised at like Oppenheimer's success, for it's a movie that the narrative, and especially the depiction of like atomic power as wholly negative, is something that feels almost counter to just like I don't know, everything in American history, or like the way it is like told to many Americans. I'm surprised. I mean, again, like it, like being subsumed into something that makes $1 billion is something kind of negative. I feel like that brings up an interesting point. But again, I'm just mostly blown away that I feel like there is a movie that is just about made $1 billion that like depicts this moment in American history, and this individual as sort of a moral coward, and many people went out of their way to see it.
Mm-hmm. It seems like that's a theme kind of this year, especially with the popular auteurs. Grim conclusions. A lot of grim conclusions on everything that's going on, whether it's like, I don't know, Ferrari, The Killer,
Kills of the Flower Moon.
Oppenheimer. Yeah, Flower Moon. At least that's my read on those.
Yeah.
Grim truths. The year of grim truths.
Hey, got to take your medicine.
Yeah.
Got to take your meds.
A reminder to our listeners, please take your medicine.
Yeah.
Reminder to our listeners, please. Well, it depends what kind of meds.
Okay.
Just kidding. We are pro mental health on this podcast. Which reminds me, we'll be right back. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. You know who could have used a little therapy? The Killer from The Killer, number 3 on our list. David Fincher's return to Netflix. After his disappointment with Mank, he comes back to pure pulp and just takes a victory lap pretty much. It's like he's back to that Fight Club 7, the game kind of like really snarky, cynical, dark, highly stylized, pulpy thriller. And he's just so matured at this point that he's bringing everything he learned as a filmmaker from, the more high or middle brow, at least, films that he made after those, like Zodiac, The Social Network, and so on, that then he can apply that sensibility to this in a way, and it feels more mature than those early movies, but in a way he's also just like reactivating that semi-immature cynicism, and I love it because this is a perfect climate for that. This is a film about society, and I couldn't be happier to have David Fincher make a film about contemporary society with a guy who listens to the Smiths. Like the dilapidated WeWork and the whole Amazon Basics thing, and using Postmates and something like Equinox. It was obviously reminiscent of the IKEA monologue from Fight Club, but I just feel like we're in such a worse place now that you no longer have that comfort, that middle class comfort of Fight Club, and now everyone's just in that hyper individualist motivation grind set, everyone for themselves, gig economy, and I just love this film as an evisceration of that culture.
Yeah, this is the male soul movie of the year, the male motivation movie of the year. Just because, I think it's such a smart movie, and in its perspective, it's very like individualistic perspective from the killer and how he lives, right? How does the modern man, he doesn't listen to the radio, he makes his own playlist. He's not listening to people around him. Like, he could curate whatever he wants and can listen to whatever he wants to in that moment. And where does he get his sustenance? It's not a nice home cooked meal. He's going to find the highest protein option available at gas stations and McDonald's, you know what I mean, and kind of make the most of that. And
I love him protein maxing at Starbucks and McDonald's. It's really like as good as it gets there. And
just like the kind of methodical nature of the movie, kind of like, I need to complete this task, need to complete that task. It's kind of funny. Like, I find it like compelling and sometimes like boring a little bit at the same time. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Kind of like this checklist of things to do as a hitman, and it's like, it's obviously giving you a more realistic view. But it's just, the way it's like chaptered up, and he kind of just goes location to location is something I find fun too, and. I don't know. It's a very Fincher vision that's like, I don't know, like I feel like no other movies really have like perfect this tone as well as this does. And JT, what did you think about The Killer?
We talked a lot, we had brought up best cinematography at a certain point. And failed to mention The Killer, which I think like Fincher is still like one of the best like digital like one of the best practitioners to like work with digital and like the cold, sterile feel it has. And I think like the world, particularly like this and Gone Girl, just works so perfectly in like depicting this sort of like antiseptic kind of lifestyle with that like clean crispness that like digital can have, that I don't think, like, I don't know, there are very few like contemporary filmmakers who want to use that look to like sort of fit in with the tone, and I feel like that they're just shooting like digital as film, and that, like, I don't know, reflects poorly on a lot of those movies. And yeah, I don't know, I just love how that like blends in with the cold coolness of like the digital world. Like you're seeing like WeWorks, and like even the way like that, like throughout a lot of his movies he's been able to integrate like text like on screen. There are like subtle little like things that like Fincher feels perfect for sort of detailing the ails of the modern world through his like style. And again, it's like in a way that's so like slick and like fun and like genre first, like where it's just like, we talked a lot, again, grim visions from auteurs, but this is like Fincher is feeding you your vegetables, but he's like sneaking it under the bun of a McDonald's hamburger. It's
God, we talked about this last week. I want McDonald's so bad.
yeah, no.
You're like, I wish.
Insane how much I want McDonald's lately. The last couple of weeks, I've just been having McDouble dreams.
It's like, what? He's like, I don't really see what's so grim about this vision of going to get McDonald's. That sounds pretty accurate to me.
By the way, yeah, so I downloaded the McDonald's app just to check prices, just because we talked about that combo last time. So they don't have that mix and match McDouble McChicken anymore, which is very disheartening. But I still think there are ways to get a couple of sandwiches for under $10 at McDonald's. You know, it's not bad. You can
Let's clear the air. Let's clear the air. Because last episode we
said some bad things about the
McDonald's
McDonald's Corporation.
menu.
Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, it used to be way better. Is the point?
Oh my God, are you kidding me? As a kid, I'm about to have a Don Draper Hershey's meltdown right now, talking about walking into McDonald's with 5 quarters in my pocket, you know, getting a double cheeseburger, not even a McDouble, the double cheeseburger.
Yeah,
come on now, that was classic.
It was
the only beef I had in my life.
They took this from us because everyone ate too many of them.
It's true. I was going. They had too many 12-year-olds wandering in with their mommy's quarters. Look, I was supposed to be spending those quarters on baseball cards, not diabetes.
We need more McDonald's scenes in movies. You know, they need to lower their price. I'm pretty sure it's like a pretty high price to get a McDonald's scene in a movie. Lower your price. Just
I
like
mean,
you should with your food.
Tom Anderson heads will remember the fake McDonald's that is in the City of Commerce in California, where they shoot all the McDonald's commercials. And why doesn't a filmmaker just use that as a set? Just be like, all right, we're setting up camp here for a couple weeks. We're making a movie. Because like it must be pretty expensive.
And I don't think, like, if you say, I'm pretty sure they're like, there's nothing negative about McDonald's in this thing you're shooting, right? You know, like, I think they might. I don't know. I think they want to keep their image clean. They don't want any Morgan Spurlocks on the scene trying to blow up their spot. You know.
I loved Fincher's vision on this. The cinematography, the work with the cinematographer that he does here is incredible. Same cinematographer as Ferrari, huh? Let's see. I wonder who got the better out of him. Wonder if he just ran out of juice. Yeah. Moving on to number 2, my number 1 of the year, coming in with, we didn't talk about this before, but let's do a little recap here. All right. Number 5, Boston Johnny had 20 points. Number 4, Oppenheimer had 24 points. The Killer, first film to hit 31 points for The Killer. But number 2, Close Your Eyes by Victor Arise, 38 points, and it deserves 1 billion points. It was my number one of the year. It was the only film that I saw this year that I actually felt was a classic, just like a genuine instant classic. And it's just his third fictional feature in a 50-year career. Spanish Master, Victor Arise's return. It suggests an artist who's like withdrawn within his own medium and his own passion for decades, rather than trying to escape it. Like you might see some kind of movie about like a reclusive artist, and he's like, "No, I'll never paint again," that kind of thing. But he's like someone who clearly the character in this movie who is going back to finish an unfinished film and find the actor who went missing from this unfinished film is so filled with passion for its own medium that it verges on a magic of movies kind of thing, but it doesn't hit that. Thank God, because the tone is so elegiac and has such personal tragedy. And it is a movie for cinephiles, but it posits itself between a life lived through images and experiences. The combination of references to movies and the editor, Max, who we talked about, like living in a room full of posters, and making references to movies every time he can. Yeah, that's in your blood. But this film is all about human relationships still at its core. It's not like the movies themselves are going to necessarily save anyone here. And I really think that is what the final gesture comes down to. That Max character jokes that what he attempts here by showing the unfinished film to the actor who he eventually finds who was suffering from amnesia. He thinks that showing him the film footage will snap him back into reality, right? And that's when Max says that miracles haven't happened with cinema since Dreyer, referring to films like Ordette and whatnot. So what we get is closer to reality, though, and it's just one of the greatest goodbyes that a filmmaker can possibly have. I thought it was just a phenomenal curtain call. Speaking of curtain calls, this film has like multiple amazing scenes that just fade to black, just like letting you just be like, damn. Curtain call moment, I love that. Like Victor Arise is just like taking bows throughout the movie, and there's a great sense of finality to it because of that. And I just thought that this was a fucking fantastic movie about dying for the movies.
Yeah, no, I love this. I had like the experience of like downloading this and starting it like three or four times throughout the week, and just not like, I don't know, just not being in the right mindset, and just like being like, oh, like this is like 2 hours and 40 minutes. Like I don't really know anything about this movie. And then just like finally when I actually gave it like a fair shake, I like just instantly just like loved it, and like all the pieces like fall into place. And I feel like it's something that was like comparable to Fallen Leaves to me, where it's just like, I don't know, people talk a lot about like a lack of like films for adults nowadays, which I kind of don't really like that like framing of things. Like, I don't know, it feels kind of silly. I mean, certainly in like feels more applicable to like Hollywood mainstream movies where that like is certainly the case. But I feel like you like more or less like there are very few movies where there's like complication or like to them, and like a complicated worldview where things aren't as clear cut. And Close Your Eyes is just one of those movies that for me feels akin to something like The Long Gray Line, where you have so like it's the poetry of life. Like you get like moments that are beautiful and like sentimental, and like a callback to like cinema, like them singing My Rifle, My Pony and Me, just beautiful and fun and just amazing. But then you also just get like the sadness of like when the lead character is trying to track down the daughter of this actor that's disappeared, and finally like finds her and talks to her about doing like like some ludicrous interview for like a shitty talk show, and she's like, yeah, no, I don't really like. I don't know. I can't watch my father's movies. Like, I don't know if my son has any interest in that or if he even does. And like, there's so much like real life pain in there, and the movie like swings back and forth between like pain and beauty and these experiences in real life and the filmic world, and is just filled with like this complication where I feel like it's like, as an artist who's matured and been working for so long, it's just like you can't like give a clean cut answer to these questions and these problems, and that like there is like there's beauty and there's suffering in the world, and Close Your Eyes tells that tale in such a masterful way that I don't know, I love it, and I agree with you. Like this, I would say potentially our number one also feels like classic status to me, but this, like, I don't know, just amazing.
Yeah.
Malcolm, you actually saw this before either of us.
Yeah, and I kind of saw it towards the back end of the festival thing, and like I feel like I like the way you guys talk about it, like I'm not like quite like this is like transcendent, like next level for me, but it's something that like I've thought about consistently since seeing it, and just there's so many aspects to this movie, right? Because the like, in addition to all that stuff, it's like almost kind of like we have the main character being like the cinematic detective and like trying to use movies, you know, almost inadvertently in a way to like solve a mystery and whatnot. And I love the bookends of like how the movie with like or not the bookends, but I'm sorry, does it end with like the scene from the not fake movie, but the old movie that the person made before?
It ends with them watching it, and then the actor's final reaction.
True,
his eyes.
I forgot. So I mean I would love to watch the fake film within the movie too. It seems so compelling. Yeah. Like I would like, it's almost just as good as the what follows. And like kind of the way this guy, you know, kind of goes about it, and kind of the, you know, the sobering reality of which he lives, and kind of him dealing with the TV stuff. It's a movie that I feel like I don't quite have like the strongest grasp on, but like it really left a strong impression on me, so it made my list. And I really want to rewatch it just because I don't know, like I said, I don't have the greatest grasp on it, but there's stuff with it that sticks with me, and there's so many different like layers to everything that it's really it's a piece of work. Yeah,
it's like part procedural kind of investigative movie, but it's also so subjective that as we see, this main character kind of thinks in cinema, so him being the cinematic detective is almost bad because he has these flights of fancy that throw him in the wrong direction that end up being like the most beautiful parts of the movie. I mean, it's a very languidly paced movie, and it just like kind of has these detours that end up with these insane frames that I just, you know, how you get there from the plot of the movie makes no sense, but you're in for the ride because of the aesthetic experience. I also think in the midst of the drama, I mean, the stuff with the daughter played by Anna Torrent is incredible, and those really intimate close-ups in shot reverse shot with her and the filmmaker Miguel are really moving, especially their eyes. I mean, Anna Torrent's eyes, like the way the cinematographer captures them, are really I don't know, it's an interesting like thing where we're somewhat subjective with the filmmaker, and it almost feels like we're investigating this woman's emotions in a way, but he's also trying to humanize himself in the meantime, like realizing that he is going through like he's activating a very sensitive thing, obviously, in this woman. So it's a really tight balancing act in terms of the drama, and I think the style is incredible. And it's, for me, it's the best film of the year, but it is only number 2. Number 1, you could probably predict it, we haven't said it yet, the #1 film for extended clip in 2023 is The Holdovers by Alexander Payne. Hey, look, I just walked outside and it looked like the damn Holdovers. Fucking white out. This is just great. I mean, I didn't really write much about The Holdovers because, to be honest, like the other, it doesn't feel like the most major of Alexander Payne's work, and I still think it's like in the top half of his filmography for sure, but it's not like he's breaking new ground into some transcendent form of drama. It's just a really, really, really strong Alexander Payne movie, and we've talked about him quite a bit on this podcast between Sideways and Election and Downsizing, which we still haven't done a proper Downsizing episode on. But his knack for looking at America and its weird pockets, weird regionally specific pockets, and the idiosyncratic characters that often exist as outsiders in them, and the strange but universal dramas that become apparent in those situations. Like, his skill has not decreased at all. It's a much more straightforward drama, though, which is why it has garnered such acclaim compared to, like, you know, he's clearly trying other things in Downsizing, you know, but this is probably his most acclaimed film since, like, Nebraska, at least. And so I get why, because it's a really, really strong drama with very fun characters, and also the aesthetic presentation is its own thing we have to dive into about nostalgia for a better time in American cinema and the fake film grain and the way it's utilized for a period piece. And I just think it's like it's both a very nice, cozy, enjoyable middle brow drama, and it also has a lot that you can kind of pick at and peel at and make it more expansive.
Yeah, no, it's a nice, like, soft throwback to, I think, a style of film that we all kind of generally appreciate. Like, I know Ashby is a big, like reference point here. I know our buddy Rob Franco just watched The Last Detail for the first time, and that's just one of those movies where it's just like the hangout sort of journey. And even though the beats of it are well tread, I mean, there's like a specificity to character here that makes it unique and like all its own. And it is like fun to see like someone like Payne, who I feel like I generally like admire and appreciate for like his cynicism and sort of like beating up his characters, is taking it a little bit easier. I mean, I still think like they're like putting them through the ringer to a certain extent, but definitely like a looser hand in terms of like throttling the characters.
Absolutely.
And
no, this is the first film of his where he doesn't seem like he's criticizing the characters, but rather giving them hard things to deal with.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I really think Giamatti is a character that is clearly flawed from the get-go. Like, you see his interpersonal shortcomings, and there's a little bit of that extra pain in there with the shots of the anal wart cream or whatever he has, or the hemorrhoid cream or whatever. But for the most part, it's like the film is really about just putting these characters kind of through the dramatic ringer to bring them closer together, and it's easily the least cynical and most heartwarming film in the Payne catalog that I've seen, at least.
And I like.
Wait, I've seen all his movies. What am I talking about?
I like that sentimentality, but I think it's sometimes like harder to achieve that and have it feel like sincere and not like bullshit. And
No,
he
absolutely.
does it, and like it stuns me.
No, I think that's almost more impressive, because he's shown us that he can do it through a sense of somewhat detached cynicism and irony, and the like comedy as a coping mechanism in his dramas. But here the comedy is like so heartfelt. It's like just characters bonding and actually laughing on screen, kind of. Yeah. We're very rarely laughing at the misfortunes of the characters like we would in the other films, or not so much misfortunes, but the shortcomings of the characters. This film is like, I love that he's actually able to pull that off, because in a vacuum I probably don't love that choice. If Alexander Payne told me, yeah, I'm gonna make a really nice movie that they could like show on Hallmark theoretically, like it's gonna be like a really sweet movie, I'd be like, what are you doing, what are you trying to do here? But he pulled it off, and that's like I don't think it's his best movie even by a long shot, but it's like one of his greatest feats to be able to pull this off so sincerely.
Yeah, no, it's middlebrow excellence. Like it's
it's Brooksian.
And I think that's what impressed me the most. And like I think I saw some. I mean, this movie's beloved, but like some light criticisms being like, "Oh, this is too sappy. It's too sentimental." And like I guess you could think that, but it's like I think when sentiment is earned in a movie, it's super powerful, and it's like I think Payne goes to great lengths to earn the sentimentality here, and it's. Like with the Giamatti character, because it's like you have it framed with like the kid, and we're seeing things through his eyes. But I think there's a real strength in like we have, with Giamatti and like Divine Joy Randolph. What's her? Paul Hunnam is his name. I don't remember him saying. I guess you call him Mr. Hunnam, right? He's your teacher.
Yeah.
But like those characters in particular are kind of. It's like the classic. Like it just reminds me of like my own life, and like not that I went to a sick, private boarding school, and my parents left me over for Christmas, but like. Those are like characters of like people along through life, and like you wonder about their life. Like a weird teacher, it's like is he going home alone every night? Like what's going on in his life that put him in this position? And yeah, I don't know, like the strength of like centering those characters' stories, and like kind of with the teen character, the classic. You realize, oh yeah, adults are human too, and they have a lot of stuff they deal with. And like, yeah, this isn't necessarily new territory, but I just feel like the setting of like is this huge private school, stuck in the snow, mixed with the, something we forgot to fail to mention. We have the Christmas sentimentality, the holidays aspect, and how, Payne obviously recognizes, the holidays for people with families sometimes is a joyous time, but if you don't get along with your family so well, or you don't have them because like they're dead or something like that, it's actually a painful time, and like the expectation to be happy is kind of like overbearing. And so like I don't know, just kind of like these like Eddie said, just recognizing the perspective of the outsider and kind of just presenting it in a sentimental way is a great feat, because in lesser hands it could be kind of just slop. But
I also think that there's a little bit of an overstated quality in the reception to this as like a 70s pastiche movie, because it's also like a beat for beat kind of remake of a 30s French movie called Merluce. And like I feel like there's a lot, he's kind of running the stylistic gamut. Like it is obviously the cinematography and the needle drops, and it's all very period appropriate, but I do feel like there's something more reflexive there about remaking a film from the 30s in France through a guise of like a kind of faux 70s Hal Ashby aesthetic, but with contemporary thinking about the 1970s. And I think that makes it a more interesting object, especially coming from someone like Payne, who, I don't know, his thoughts on American specificity, like in the towns that he depicts, used to be so important. But then you think about his last two now, it's like downsizing, and it's like these are not places where he's hanging out. He can go like observe the behaviors of people in downsizing world or in 70s Boston anymore. So I find that really interesting, of him maybe going a little more interior and thinking, instead of about the people of specific places, he's thinking more about humanity as a whole, and just like where you can go dramatically just with characters, and I think that's a really interesting stride for him. And I think that of his generation, he's he's the only one who's not the only one, but it's really nice to see that he is still just like trending upward, in my opinion. Like maybe Sideways and Downsizing are like my two favorite Alexander Payne movies, right? But his overall, like between where he's at with critical acclaim and getting movies funded, and also his current level of skill, what he's kind of putting out there for us, he's trending upward for sure right now, and that's an amazing thing to say about someone who debuted with Citizen Ruth and then even had a classic in the 90s with Election. Not that Citizen Ruth's not a classic debut in its own right, but like to make something as good as Election in 99 and then totally transform yourself as a filmmaker to make something like The Holdovers 30 plus years later is just like roughly 30 years later is just like such a remarkable achievement. And I can't wait to see what he makes as a fucking old geese, you know, when he's making like late style movies as an 80-year-old, like reminiscing about the 2000s, about the Bush era. Like that'll be amazing. But Alexander Payne, my hat's off to you. As always, you're definitely one of the better directors of the pod, as we've talked about pretty recently with the Sideways and Election eps, and soon to come with the Downsizing episode. That is both a promise and a threat. Any final words on The Holdovers here before we move on?
No, I'm all good. I said my piece.
And by move on, I say goodbye. We will see you next time on The Clip for a normal episode, back to the regular structure. I know this was a midweek double drop. Next week we'll go back to the Patreon Monday, regular feed Thursday, or Patreon Tuesday. You know, it's early week, late week. That's how I do it these days. But we will see you then, and thank you for making it this far into the episode. If you're only hearing this second half, you can go back and hear the first half on Patreon. You can hear the whole thing. Patreon.com/extended_clip. The link is in the episode description. It's $5 a month for an extra episode every week. And if you donate at the $15 a month executive producer tier, we will dedicate an episode to you and your film programming prowess. You will pick a movie for us to cover. Very soon, we will be doing one of these episodes on Jean Eustache's The Mother and the Whore. And then, guess what? We just got another producer in the bank the other day, baby. I will have to double check on what his pick is, but we are very excited to have this guy join us. Well, we'll talk about it on the next episode. But anyway, if this is your first time listening to Extended Clip, go back. There's a fat back catalog, but it's even fatter if you donate for the Patreon. Any final words, boys?
I just want to say $5 is an incredible deal. I think I've heard that you cannot even get a McDonald's sandwich for that price anymore. So, I don't know.
Let alone two McDonald's sandwiches,
exactly.
Which is what you should get for that price. Look, sorry, I don't mean to raise my voice. It's just something I get passionate about.
Let's go get some McDoubles, boys.
That's where we'll be if you want to find us. You know, at McDonald's.
Yeah, at your local McDonald's.
Also, you can email the podcast at extendedclippodcast@gmail.com. You send it, we read it. That's always the promise. So on our next episode, I hope we get some mailbag stuff because, look, I'm going to be nicer this time. That's my promise. I'll be really nice. We just read it. I won't even answer. I'll just read it. And Malcolm and JT will give their patented nice guy answer.
True. I need to be harsher. I need to be...
No. If anything about this podcast and all three people on it, I think we got to push positivity. That's what I've learned lately.
That's
you
why
got
we
to push
pulled over...
positivity or people do not like you at all.
That's why we put Holdovers number 1. We're pushing P, pushing positivity. You know what I mean?
PP, baby, pushing P. All right, goodbye.